Welcome to Colonize the Ocean podcast, where we discuss oceanic colonization, exploration, and education with your hosts Adam Jewell and Brendan Traxler.
Okay, let's unpack this. 70% of Earth's resources are underwater. That's huge.
It really is.
Yet the permanent undersea population is, well, exactly zero.
Yeah.
Zero.
Yeah, fun.
We're all crowded onto land, often looking, up at the stars for new frontiers.
Right, to space.
But this vast ocean right here, pretty much uninhabited permanently. What's behind that? It seems astonishing.
It's a fundamental puzzle, isn't it? We put so much effort into understanding, Mars, distant planets.
Mapping them, even.
Exactly, mapping terrain light years away, while our own ocean depths, they're largely unexplored by people actually living there.
It really makes you think about our land-based focus.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're looking at the potential and, the challenges of setting up permanent undersea colonies.
It's fascinating stuff.
Our guide for this is a great book. It really tries to make this whole scientific and technical discussion accessible for everyone.
That's important.
The author specifically says they want to reach people without a science background, like Aunt Miriam and the kids is the phrase used.
I like that. That approachability is key, isn't it? Because often this kind of topic gets bogged down in, technical jargon.
Oh, absolutely. And this source avoids that pretty well, which is what we always aim for here.
Definitely.
So, okay, this book covers a huge range. History, engineering, legal stuff.
Even future undersea nation states.
Right. So our mission today is basically to pull out the really interesting bits, the surprising facts, those aha moments.
Give you a shortcut, sort of.
Exactly. A shortcut to understanding this incredible, mostly untouched frontier right here on Earth.
And to really get it, it helps to shift how we even think about Earth.
Yeah.
The source brings up Victor Hugo's idea that Earth is really an ocean planet interrupted by occasional land.
That changes everything, doesn't it? Suddenly land is the exception.
It flips the perspective, and it makes terms like the seven seas seem a bit misleading.
How so?
Well, H.B. Stewart is quoted saying the ocean is fundamentally one global sea. It's all connected.
Ah, right. We divide it up conceptually, but it's one system.
Exactly. Vast, interconnected, which just highlights that puzzle again, knowing more about Mars than our own deep ocean.
Okay, so why haven't we set up shop down there permanently? The book suggests a few reasons. One is simply the growing need for space on land. Overcrowding is real.
Absolutely. Think about land conflicts, the cost of real estate.
Astronomical in some places. So the ocean looks like this huge untapped resource for living space.
It does, and then there's this counterintuitive argument about the environment.
Go on.
The book argues our lack of undersea presence actually hinders environmental stewardship.
Really?
The idea is if we were living and working there, observing constantly,
We'd be better protectors.
we'd have firsthand data, a much deeper understanding. We could be way more effective guardians of that whole ecosystem.
That turns the usual argument on its head, doesn't it? That undersea settlement would be bad for the environment.
It does. It asks, how well can we really protect something we aren't truly present in? It's like trying to manage a forest you never walk through.
It's a strong point. Especially when, we know the weather on Mars better than the currents a few miles offshore sometimes.
Crazy, right?
But the book goes further. It suggests undersea settlement isn't just possible, it's inevitable.
Pretty much, yeah. The author feels strongly about this.
It makes them so sure.
Well, they look at history, human expansion patterns.
Okay.
We've always pushed frontiers, right? Driven by need or opportunity. The ocean has vast resources, huge strategic importance.
So it's the logical next step in that long history of expansion.
That's the argument. It seems bound to happen eventually.
Okay. Big picture established, the why not yet, and the why maybe soon. But let's get practical. What were the first real steps towards living underwater?
The book digs into some really early ingenious stuff. You won't believe it, but Leonardo da Vinci
Da Vinci. What did he do?
sketched designs for something like scuba way back 16th century.
No way. That's incredible.
And then in the 1700s, you get diving bells becoming more practical. And even things like Lethbridge's diving engine
Which was?
Basically a sealed barrel with armholes and a viewing port, a very, very early kind of diving suit.
Wow. Resourceful.
Yeah.
But the game changer, the thing that really opened the door, was the aqualung, right? Cousteau and Gagne.
Oh, absolutely. Mid-1940s, that democratized things, made underwater exploration accessible.
For recreation, for short-term work, yeah. But permanent living, who started thinking seriously about that?
That vision really comes from Dr. George Bond, U.S. Navy physician.
Okay.
He envisioned permanent undersea bases, and he made this key distinction
Between
submariners in their moving vessels and aquanauts.
Aquanauts. Define that.
People living and working in fixed underwater habitats for more than 24 hours without surfacing.
Got it. Living in the environment, not just passing through.
Yeah.
And the book names Robert Stenuit.
The world's first aquanaut.
Right.
A real pioneer, part of those early experiments.
These early figures really set the stage, didn't they? For what the book calls the great race of undersea habitats.
That's right. You had Jacques Cousteau with his Con Shelf program.
Which had those really cool, almost sci-fi looking designs.
Yeah, visually striking. And then in parallel, the U.S. Navy with the Sea Lab projects.
Which were less aesthetically pleasing.
Huh. Yeah, Sea Lab, I looked functional. The book says, like a submarine with legs affixed to a pair of pontoons.
Okay, function over form. But Sea Lab I, under Dr. Bond, produced some crucial data. Right?
Absolutely. Critical early medical data. They found physical and mental functions slowed down a bit at pressure.
Interesting.
And the body adapted to lower calorie intake. Also, a weird quirk, after being deep, coming shallower made them more susceptible to nitrogen narcosis.
Wow. Okay. That's counterintuitive. Big implications for safety and planning.
Definitely. Then came Sea Lab 2. A bit more luxurious, apparently.
Luxurious underwater. What did that mean?
Well, viewports, for one, windows, and astronaut Scott Carpenter was famously involved.
An astronaut aquanaut.
Yeah.
Cool.
Sea Lab 2 was a step up, but it wasn't all smooth sailing in this era. There were other habitats, too.
Like
Hydrolab, a very productive research habitat, and Tectate.
Ah, where NASA got involved, using it as a space analog.
Exactly. Studying isolation, confinement, how people cope in small spaces for long durations.
Yeah.
Underwater simulating space.
Clever link. But
Yeah.
then Sea Lab the Third.
Yeah. Tragically, there was a death during Sea Lab the Third. An aquanaut died during setup operations.
Oh.
And that effectively ended the Navy's aquanaut program, just like that. A huge setback.
A stark reminder of the risks. It's amazing the book points to 1968 as the peak year for these programs.
Yeah.
Then a decline.
Yeah, a definite peak and then
Yeah.
a drop-off.
What caused that shift, do you think, besides the Sea Lab tragedy?
Probably a mix of things.
Yeah.
The tragedy raised safety questions for sure, but also maybe a realization of just how hard it was.
The sheer difficulty.
Yeah, the technological hurdles, the physiological challenges of humans living at pressure, exposed via moon pools.
Yeah.
Maybe the initial excitement met a wall of reality.
But the dream didn't die completely. The book brings in Ian Koblick and Jules Undersea Lodge. That sounds different.
Totally different. Jules was a turning point. It wasn't government or big research anymore.
What was it?
An underwater hotel, basically, accessible to recreational divers. It showed undersea living could be, well, almost normal. For short stays, anyway.
So it opened it up to a wider audience.
Exactly. And NASA came back later, too, using places like the Aquarius Reef Base for NEMO missions. More space analog work.
Still valuable, that connection. Now, Cousteau. He was so central early on, but the book says he later seemed a bit skeptical about permanent settlements.
Yeah, it addresses that apparent change of heart, but it suggests his skepticism wasn't about the idea of living underwater.
What about?
More about those early methods, specifically trying to get humans to adapt to high-pressure environments with open moon pools connecting directly to the living space.
Ah, so it wasn't the goal, but the how. He questioned trying to change the human, maybe.
Exactly. The book argues there was an early overestimation of human adaptability. A bit like early space exploration hopes, maybe.
Yeah, thinking we could just easily adapt to wildly different environments.
Well, right. We found out it's harder than it looks, which led to what the book calls a new pathway.
Okay, what's the new pathway?
Focus on maintaining a near-normal, one-atmosphere environment inside the habitat.
So like living on the surface, but underwater.
Pretty much. Using a pressure hatch between the living area and any wet access, like a moon pool.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Create the environment for us. Don't try to remake us for the environment.
Precisely. Which brings us to this really interesting concept. Aquaticans.
Aquaticans. not aquanauts.
Right. Aquaticans are the envisioned permanent residents, people intending to live there, not just visit or work temporarily like aquanauts.
Okay, a different mindset entirely. Why would people want to become aquaticans?
The book suggests diverse reasons. Just like on land, people want different things. Some might love warm tropical reefs.
Others might want the deep ocean.
Maybe the mid-ocean void even. Different strokes for different folks underwater, too.
And the author talks about 2 lists justifying this life.
Yeah, sort of personal, deep-seated motivations on one list.
And on the other.
Broader reasons. Things everyone could understand. Universally compelling arguments.
Oh, let's hear them. The book lays out 8 key reasons for permanent undersea occupation.
Okay, number 1, stewardship. Being in the ocean allows us to monitor and protect it better. It's the largest region, greatest biodiversity impact potential.
Makes sense. Living there to care for it. 2,
Scientific discovery. Unparalleled opportunities for marine research right on your doorstep.
continuous observation. Got it. 3,
Resources. Over 70% of Earth's resources are supposedly underwater. Huge potential for sustainable acquisition.
okay, that's a big one. 4,
New nations and empires, maybe a bit out there, but historically, new frontiers often lead to new political entities.
a long view. 5,
Overcoming fear and timidity. It's about that human drive, conquering new frontiers, pushing boundaries, historical precedent.
right, the explorer spirit. Are there 8s? That's 5.
Let's see. Stewardship, science, resources, new nations, overcoming fear. The outline mentions 8, but maybe the source grouped them slightly differently. Those seem like the core pillars discussed.
Okay, those 5 are pretty compelling on their own. And the author wraps it up with a simple thought.
Yeah. People always wind up doing the things they want to do. That fundamental human desire.
Powerful. Okay, let's picture it. Daily life. What's an undersea home actually like? The book mentions different types.
Right. Ambient pressurized, where the inside pressure matches the outside water pressure.
Okay, like the early moon pool design.
Exactly. Then pressurized less than ambient, and hybrid systems, but importantly, not those temporary engineering cofferdams. Those don't count as habitats.
Got it. What does it feel like inside?
The book gives great sensory details, gentle vibrations from machinery, the constant hum of life support,
Sounds noticeable.
but also surprisingly conducive to sleep, apparently, a steady background noise.
Huh. And what about being at pressure? Nitrogen saturation.
Yeah, that's key for ambient pressure habitats. Your body tissues absorb nitrogen at depth. It limits how long you can stay or how quickly you can surface without decompression stops.
Like the 30-foot moon pool example.
Yeah.
Near the no decompression limit.
Exactly. So that limits excursions if you're saturated.
What about interacting with the sea life? That must be amazing.
Sounds incredible. Feeding fish from the wet room, watching this living carpet of microscopic life build up on surfaces.
Which then attracts bigger fish.
Right, the whole food chain right outside your window or even growing on it.
And the aquanauts uniform?
Apparently, in the dry, warm areas, a bikini Speedo and t-shirt is often the go-to.
Practical, I guess. And the habitat engineer role sounds critical.
Absolutely crucial. Someone like Joseph M. Bishop mentioned in the book, keeping everything running, the chief mechanic, basically.
And the physics are different inside, right? Higher pressure.
If it's pressurized, yeah. The example given is 1.6 atmospheres. That changes things.
Like boiling water.
Yep. Water boils at a higher temperature. Cooking times change. Little things you wouldn't think about.
Fascinating. And mealtime becomes more important.
Psychologically, yes. A key social event. Helps combat any, subliminal stress of isolation.
Makes sense. What about upkeep? Cleaning windows must be constant.
Oh, yeah. Marine particulates, organisms, barnacles growing on the viewports.
Which the book says can be entertaining to watch grow.
Apparently so.
Well,
Better than TV sometimes, maybe.
So it's a mix of intense work.
Often very scheduled. Research, maintenance.
And moments of peace.
Yeah.
Especially in places like Jules Lodge.
Right. That contrast between the working aquanaut's intense day and the tranquility for recreational visitors.
And supplies. Fresh food must be a treat.
Delivered from the surface occasionally, a big event, I imagine.
Downtime in the evening is important too. And tidiness.
Crucial. Relaxation is needed, and keeping things tidy isn't just neatness, it's safety in a confined space.
It all paints a really vivid picture. It's interesting to contrast that with how people used to view the ocean.
Oh, totally. Ancient literature. The deep was often a place of dread isolation. Psalms, Ezekiel, Jonah.
Fear and mystery.
A huge contrast to this vision of, communities living there. But even back then, practicalities existed.
Like what?
Wage scales for divers in ancient Rome, 100 BC. Recognizing the risk of going deeper meant higher pay.
Wow. And tech slowly improved. Air hoses, goggles.
Baby steps, gradually pushing the boundaries of how long and how deep we could go.
Okay, let's get technical for a moment. Life support systems, LSS. What are the absolute basics in undersea habitat needs?
Okay, core functions. Provide breathable air, meaning enough oxygen. Remove the CO2 we exhale. Control temperature and humidity. And manage waste.
Simple list, complex execution. The book mentions early systems, like constant flow air.
Yeah, first generation stuff. Constant flow means pumping surface air down continuously.
Advantages, disadvantages.
Simple design, no need for stored oxygen or CO2 scrubbers on board, but uses a lot of energy, and if that compressor fails...
Game over for the mission.
Right. What about needing special gas mixes? The book questions that.
It does. Suggests that for moderate pressures, like 1.6 atmospheres, plain old air works fine. Some even reported faster healing.
Anecdotal, but interesting. So maybe exotic mixes aren't always needed for permanent living.
Maybe not. But system reliability, that's absolutely critical, non-negotiable underwater.
And what about those sci-fi bioregenerative systems? Using plants and algae.
CELSS, closed ecological life support systems. Great concept, recycle everything. But the book says they're practically very challenging. Hard to make them efficient and totally reliable for humans.
So the future is probably hybrid.
Seems likely. Combining different technologies. Algae for some gas exchange, surface air backup, maybe wave power, using seawater to absorb CO2, redundancy and efficiency.
Okay. And the basic numbers. How much oxygen does a person need?
Roughly 2 pounds of oxygen consumed per day and about 2 pounds of CO2 produced.
Got it. So how do you supply the O2? Compressed tanks, like SCBA, pumping down compressed air, maybe plant systems eventually, or electrolysis splitting water into hydrogen and oxygen.
And getting rid of the CO2.
Chemical scrubbers, like in spacecraft, exchanging it directly with seawater, or using algae, again, they consume CO2.
Lots of options. What about the habitat structure itself? Insulation.
Needs to be biologically inert, can't have mold growing everywhere in that humid environment.
Right, and special paints.
Anti-fouling paints, yeah. On surfaces where condensation forms to stop stuff growing. Humidity control is huge, needs backup systems.
Makes sense. Now, inside the habitat, light. The book says it's really important.
Hugely important. Subliminally affects well-being. Bad lighting can genuinely cause depression.
And windows. There's a debate there. View versus vulnerability.
Yeah. Submarines often have few or no windows for strength against, depth charges or shock waves.
But the book argues undersea colonies aren't facing torpedoes.
Right. So the psychological benefit of windows, natural light, connection to the outside, probably outweighs the perceived risk for a civilian habitat. Strategic placement is key.
And the light outside is different underwater, isn't it?
Definitely. The day feels shorter, less light penetrates, and colors change. Water absorbs reds and oranges first. Everything looks bluer or greener the deeper you go.
So lighting inside needs to compensate.
Yeah, using different color temperatures, cool white for work, warmer yellow for living areas, maybe programmable systems mimicking daylight in the future.
But lighting uses energy.
True. Efficiency is important. It all ties back to power needs.
And design generally. We want form and function.
But the ocean mainly cares about pressure and force. Function has to come first. The Pacifica example from the author's fiction illustrates those design choices.
Okay, crucial question for these permanent residents. The Aquaticans.
Yeah.
Getting around. Freedom of movement. Commuting.
Absolutely vital for a real colony, not just an outpost.
The book tackles a misconception here about long decompression times for surface trips.
Yes. It emphasizes the goal is no decompression commuting for routine travel. Design the system around that.
Like early aviation. Risky at first, then became routine.
Good parallel. It was dangerous and uncomfortable, and now it's incredibly safe and common. Undersea commuting needs that evolution.
So how would they commute?
Personal subs, maybe? Larger colony submarines, like the DST-2 mentioned? Or diving bells, underwater elevators? Moving between pressures safely without saturation.
And connecting it all is the surface support structure, the S3.
Critical piece. It's the POMS link, weather station, supply platform, maybe power generation hub.
Using wind, solar, wave power.
Potentially all of the above, plus maybe backup fossil fuels. But the key thing about the S3,
What's that?
it needs to be able to submerge, get below the waves during bad storms to protect itself and maintain the link.
Wow, a submerging support station, complex stuff. And this all needs a reliable supply chain, right?
Absolutely essential, linking the surface world and the colony, which brings up the three-dimensional kingdom idea.
Explain that.
Thinking beyond just the seafloor, not just two-dimensional like land. Colonies could be anchored or maybe tethered, suspended mid-water. It opens up the whole water column.
Not just shallow shelves.
Yeah.
Deeper possibilities.
Exactly. But unlike land life, where nature provides a lot of life support passively.
Undersea habitats depend totally on power.
Totally. Reliable power is non-negotiable. Redundant systems are a must.
Could they generate power in situ? Down there?
Potentially.
Yeah.
The book mentions harnessing currents, like the Gulf Stream, specialized underwater generators.
That'd be a game changer. And water. Surrounded by it, but need fresh water.
A classic irony. Water everywhere. But yeah, standard desalination methods work, reverse osmosis, distillation.
Can they use other resources found down there? Build an economy?
That's the hope. In situ resource utilization. But building a truly self-sustaining community, the book calls it like building castles in the air, a huge challenge.
What specific resources could they potentially source locally?
Okay, oxygen, pump air, use membranes, grow plants, split water, CO2 removal, use seawater, membranes, plants again, fresh water, extraction, food, aquaculture.
Aquaculture seems like a natural fit. Underwater farms.
Huge potential there. Carefully managed, sustainable fish or shellfish farming could even aid research.
And building materials. That accretion technology sounds wild.
Using minerals in seawater to grow structures. Yeah, Chris Scala's sculptures are mentioned as proof of concept. Very cool.
But with all this, environmental responsibility is key.
Foundational. The book cites Rachel Carson's The Sea Around Us as a huge motivator. We should be caretakers, not just exploiters.
What are the principles?
Net zero initial impact, aiming to become a positive impact over time. A zero-waste society within the colony. Focus on resource recovery, not disposal.
Resource recovery, not waste disposal. I like that framing.
The author even shares a personal story about seeing pollution to drive home that commitment. And projects like Challenger Station.
What's its focus?
A permanent deep water habitat, specifically for collecting baseline environmental data, long-term monitoring.
Okay, crucial work. But how do you pay for all this? Economics.
Big question. Needs investment. The book compares it to the high-risk venture capital that funded early land colonies.
Risky but potentially high reward. What could generate revenue?
Tourism is a big one mentioned. Different packages, different experiences underwater.
But people worry about safety, right? Risk perception.
Addressed directly. Statistically, a well-designed colony could be safer than driving your car.
Really? What about the big fears? Flooding.
Historically, no inhabited habitat has ever catastrophically flooded. It's not happened.
What about fire?
That is acknowledged as the biggest threat. So extreme prevention and suppression measures are essential.
Dropped anchors, collisions.
Low probability, especially for deeper habitats, safety zones, monitoring, manageable risks.
The book mentions lessons from biosphere to second.
Yeah, mainly about public relations, the need for clear communication, objective science, not just hype.
And objections from environmentalists.
It distinguishes between radical views and genuine conservation. Argues colonies could help conservation, providing data on pollution like the Pacific garbage patch, continuous monitoring.
Okay. What about laws? Permissions? Liability?
It's murky. Few specific laws exist for permanent undersea structures. Insurance becomes incredibly important.
And social acceptance. Getting people comfortable with the idea.
It compares it to other things that were once seen as risky: aquariums, planes, cars. Education and familiarity are key.
And always coming back to safety design. The one atmosphere approach.
Absolutely. The core philosophy is human protection. Make the environment suit us.
The author seems passionate about families living there, not just explorers.
Very much so. That's the vision. True colonies, not just temporary bases. Designed for families, for long-term life.
Which leads to thinking about undersea cities eventually.
Yeah, evolving from colonies to larger settlements. Maybe segregated functional areas, logistics, residential, research.
And the legal side of that. Undersea nations within existing economic zones.
Yeah. Very complex legal questions down the road. Lots to figure out.
The book includes a fictional bit to make it feel real.
Yeah, a short scene of a sub arriving at a colony, Cerulean Dominion. Gives a glimpse of what it might feel like welcoming established.
And the message is, this future isn't just for pros.
Exactly. It's for everyone. Though, interestingly, the need for professional divers would likely increase to support these communities.
Makes sense. And a final word of caution.
Just practical advice. Anyone even building a model needs to prioritize safety above all else. Don't mess around with pressure.
Good advice. Okay, so surfacing from this deep dive, what are the big takeaways?
Huge potential down there. Technology is making it more feasible. The focus shift to one atmosphere, family-friendly habitats is key.
And strong motivations. Resources, stewardship, science, that human drive.
Leading eventually perhaps to undersea cities, maybe even nations.
It leaves you thinking, doesn't it? What does it mean for humanity to become truly three-dimensional, not just land-bound?
What discoveries, what solutions might come from really living in and understanding that huge part of our planet?
It prompts you to think about your own two lists
Right.
for such a life, and just how connected we are to that vast ocean.
Definitely food for thought. And if you want to learn more, check out those projects mentioned, Leviathan, Challenger Station, the author's website, too.
A whole other world to explore right beneath the waves.